I see myself working in a, whatever, a corporate or a company, probably for another 10 years. And in my mind, I went into the search initially thinking it was going to be one more thing for 10 years. And now I realize that may not be what happens. It might be one thing for 3 years and then something else. And I'm not going to think in such, to your point earlier, a linear fashion about what has to be next.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, and I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host. Today, I'm talking to my friend Debra Schwartzfarb, a highly skilled HR executive. That's an odd way to introduce a friend, right? Anyway, Debra, the reason why is that Debra and I have never met in real life. We met this year online in a daily Zoom call called Remote Daily. It's an interactive talk show that's hard to describe. We often call it the Zoom call that doesn't suck. And some of you who've been listening have probably heard me talk about it before anyway. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because after getting to know Deb in this group, I realized she had walked away from a position that she'd held for 9 years because she realized it wasn't the best ultimate match for her skills. She separated from that job expecting a normal job search, and then the COVID shutdown happened, changing everything. Deb stepped into her job search with such a great attitude that I really felt like it would be helpful for anybody else who may have lost a job this year to hear kind of how she's staying above the fray and keeping herself busy and engaged while she looks for a job. So we'll take it from here. Let's go. Thank you so much for being with me, Debra.
Oh, it's great. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I remember, so for those of you listening, I met Debra through Remote Daily, which I think people have heard me mention before if you've ever listened to the podcast. It's an awesome interactive talk show thing that's really hard to describe, but
yeah.
I will put a link in the show notes for people if anybody wants to go check that out. And I guess what struck me one day after we'd been in, on this Zoom call almost daily for all this time was you like kind of talking about your career shift. And I kind of got excited about talking to you about that. So thank you.
It's still shifting.
It's still shifting. Well, that's kind of the beauty of it. I think I think often what it is that we all think, okay, there's like this linear path, right? And it really never is that, is it?
No, it isn't. And no matter where you are in your career, I think you'd think something's going to happen, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And you just sort of have to go with it. I mean, you can only do what you can do. So you just got to go for the ride, I guess.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and start with like kind of your background and what brought you to your here and now, and then maybe where you're heading from here. Let's kind of dive in.
Okay. So a very, big picture is have been in human resources or related to human resources jobs my entire career. So I spent 20 years at Toys R Us, doing, back
Cool.
in the day.
I did not know that. I didn't look that up. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I worked in human resources most of that time. I started out in the stores where you had to kind of start learning the business, and then, worked into human resources. And I stayed in 3 of their divisions. I worked in their corporate office and for 20 years. And then when they went private, I decided to make a change. I mean, it had been a long time. So I ended up next at the Gap, and then after also in human resources, and then went to Macy's. So my experience is all in consumer retail brands up until my most recent role. And while I was at Macy's, I got a call from a guy that I knew who owned a recruiting business, doing executive search. And we got to talking, and it was not anything I'd ever considered doing. But he was an entrepreneur, is an entrepreneur, and we got to talking, and he was building his business. It was during the recession, and I knew Macy's wasn't going to be my final stop. So I decided to join his firm, and I was there until March of this year, almost 9 years. So a
Wow.
long time. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, a long time. In
So
fact, I think the last time we talked, I guess I didn't even realize that you had such a background in retail. I think the impression I was left with the last time we spoke was that it was primarily recruiting for you. But I guess it's because it was such a long time with that, right?
it was a long time, and I enjoyed it. It's a different kind of industry, but the one piece of it that I never liked, and I knew from the beginning, was the business development side of it. The going out and getting business. It's just not what I like to do. And when I joined there, that was okay, but the business evolved and changed, and it was requiring more of that, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I left at the end of February, beginning of March, and expecting, that I would have a typical
Oh.
job search, and then walked right into
Oh.
COVID.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. So this like takes a whole new thing. So your whole background has been HR. What would you say is like been the most fulfilling part of that for you? What part of that overall scope
Mhm.
is the thing that like kept you going all these years?
I think for me, I love to assess people and understand people. I have a pretty high EQ. I think people tell me that. I feel that about myself. I really understand people and where they're coming from. I'm a pretty good listener as well. And so it's listening and understanding, where do people fit in an organization? Are they, where do they belong? Assessing people to bring into an organization or to make moves. I think that's probably my sweet spot of really understanding how things fit together and where people fit into that. And that's why when I went into executive search, it's a different industry, but you're really doing the same thing. You're quickly learning a company culture, that's the client, and then trying to find the best match for that role. And that's what made it really exciting for me, is not just to fill a job, but to find a really great person who is going to not only be a great fit, but succeed beyond that. And that's what ended up happening. So
Yeah.
the two tie together. It's just a little bit of a different take on it.
Yeah, it sounds like matchmaking, right? Like
In some ways it is, and as a recruiter, you're sort of doing the speed dating part of it, right? Where you're meeting
right.
a lot of people, and then you're picking out the ones you think are good, the client's going to like the best. So yeah.
Wow. Wow. What was it like for you when when you made the change from retail to executive recruiting? What was that like?
Well, the firm that I worked for was in the consumer space. So we did retail, wholesale, direct to consumer businesses. So that part wasn't as different
Uh-huh.
because it was the same industry. I think the biggest change for me was going from these, I was working for Fortune 500, these huge corporate companies, and going into a company that I think when I joined at the time maybe was 12 people. And when I
Oh,
left was,
yeah.
I think, 30. So a tiny company. That was probably the bigger change for me, was, could I
Interesting.
do that? Would I be happy in such a small company?
Yeah, and it seems like you were. You were there for a long time.
Yeah, I loved it. The people were great. The one thing I learned, different than corporate, because it's not a corporate environment, is there are no secrets in a small company like that. Like, you can't, everybody knows everything, and people just, you can't, there's no rules, there's not a lot of policies. So you just have to go with it, and that was probably the biggest learning, is like, this is happening and everyone's going to know.
How interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me in some ways of some of the things that we've talked about in remote daily, in that in that here we are, and um, even if you are still working for a corporation, all of a sudden, because we're doing so much over Zoom, we're letting people into our homes, and and it blurs that line, right, between business and personal.
Yeah. Yes. It's It's interesting. Yes. And that's a good analogy, I think, because being in such a small company is very intimate in that way almost.
Mhm.
And, it does require you to have different skills in some ways to be able to sort of maneuver around and sort of mind your own business when you can hear everything that's going on because it's such a small space,
Right.
and giving people the privacy they need. And it's the same thing, like you say, like you're coming into my house here, and what are you thinking about it, and how do you sort of manage that? It's a similar kind of thing in a small company, or at least in the one I was in.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow, wow, wow. So my gosh. So then you're like, okay, I'm ready to move on. I'm gonna go do this job search and shabam, COVID. Oh boy. What has that been like for you?
Well, one of the things that I had done before I left there, because I left in it was amicable and I understood, it made sense. We agreed it wasn't, things had changed and I understood it. And so one of the things that I had done was ask for some outplacement. So I could have some help with my search, which is executive outplacement, where you go and they give you some, guidelines on job search. And even though I came out of search, when you're doing your own search, it's helpful to have somebody to really help you. And so the other reason I wanted it is because they would have given me a place to go. So they had office space where you could like hoteling office space where you could go every day and have a place to sit and use your computer and feel
Mhm.
like you were getting out of your house. And I'm like, living in a New York apartment, who wants to do a job search from their house if you could avoid it? So that was part of it. So 2 weeks
Ugh.
in, everything shut down and I was back in my apartment. So on the good side, everybody was in their house. So I did not feel isolated the way I think I was going to feel had I not had outplacement to go to. I
Right.
never felt that way because everybody was home. So that part was fine. It's just, what I'm finding is that a lot of places, people got furloughed. Some companies have just stopped recruiting for a while as they figure out kind of what's going on. And the other thing is that when I started the search, unemployment was so low that I knew it would take me a long time. I mean, I have a lot of experience. It's not jobs at my level don't come that easily. And I'm going back in-house, which is kind of switching industries again. And
Mhm.
what I find is that, people who are hiring now or who would have been my clients in search, they can get exactly what they want. So they can have all these criteria
Mhm.
and find people that match that criteria exactly. Whereas when unemployment's really low, they have to be a little more open and creative. And I'm finding that my background doesn't necessarily exactly fit into every box. So it's just
Mhm.
taking me a little bit longer to network. And it's not just me. I mean, I belong to some networking groups, and some people are landing, and there's a bunch of people who are still working at it. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
been a challenge, but I've met so many great people networking that I'm feeling good that beginning of next year, I think companies are going to start to hopefully make some moves.
Yeah, and, you know what I love about what you've been doing during this time, is besides the networking, like with Remote Daily, is you kind of stepping up with Remote Daily to help them in their hiring process as they are growing and changing and their model and needing new people and just to see you step up and get so actively involved in helping them. I mean, that's a huge thing to keep yourself busy in that way and to be able to speak to what you've been doing during this time, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. One of the decisions that I made consciously especially when COVID hit, and I knew it was just going to elongate this process in some ways for me. I mean, you never know, but I had that sense. And I thought, you know what, I have to stay current and I have to make sure that I'm staying connected to people. I know what's going on. So, one of the things that I do is, first of all, I have a regular schedule where I start X time in the morning, get into my work or, the work of finding work. And I'm very, religious about that. I exercise in the morning and then I get straight to it. And I try to do some sort of educational thing every day, whether it's a webinar or some sort of online presentation. And that turned out to be, in some cases, remote daily, which was just somebody in my networking group introduced me to it, Chris. And then I started coming on, and I thought, you know what, if I can stay active and help out with remote daily, at least that will get me engaged. And like you said, meet people like you, or meet, other people that I never would have met any other way. So thank you for that. And I would encourage anybody who's in this process to look for other outlets to keep themselves busy and engaged, because that will also help you to network and meet people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only have you helped them, hire a new producer at Remote Daily, but you also have been so key in bringing on guests or suggesting good guests for them to have on. And,
Jade, Jade is amazing. She's so good.
Tell us a little bit about Jade so that people know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So Jade, one of the things that I wanted to do was help to bring some guests on. And I was thinking about some women that I knew who were entrepreneurs who had to sort of pivot their own businesses during COVID, and thought maybe this remote daily could give them some airtime and some, help with their businesses. So Jade is my yoga teacher when I was working out at a gym, and she actually was a spin teacher, and then she got her yoga certification, and she encouraged me to try yoga. And I'm not that flexible, but it was her. She's so lovely. I know you've been with her, and you know what I mean. Like, she's so nice and not judgmental at all. And so I started doing yoga with her at the gym. And then when COVID came, she pivoted to Zoom. So I've been doing yoga with her. And then when Remote Daily came on and I was thinking about guests, I'm like, oh, she would be a perfect guest, somebody who's pivoted. And I had no realization or expectation that anything else would happen. And she came on as a guest. And then when Britt left, I guess Felix and she had hit it off and had a good conversation. So now she's she's part of their team. And I love that. Doing breathing exercises for everybody. And then she brought her sister, which is great as well. So
the whole thing has just been incredible. And you also brought on Kimberly Miner, who, it's funny, just full circle here. I ended up having her on as a guest because I'm there in Remote Daily, and I was just so impressed with who she is and how she moves through the world. And then now you guys are partnering up.
It's a small world. Kimberly was a placement of mine. I placed her in 2014 in a job, and we stayed friends, and we stayed in touch. And she reached out when she was starting her own pivot a couple of years ago. And she's like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this. And we had some conversations, just wanted my opinion. And we stayed in touch. And then when I left my company, we were in touch again. And I saw her doing more work on the diversity and equity and inclusion space. And I love that myself, and have worked, had done a lot of work placing people diverse, using diversity in my practice. I also, prior, when I was in companies, did a lot of diversity training. I'm just very much passionate about the subject. So she and I decided that we would try doing this series of kind of conversations on LinkedIn. She has a lot of practice because she's been doing a lot, I'm sure on Facebook and other places. I did not have any practice, so I'm sort of learning on the go. But
I'm just going to tell you, you are a total natural. The minute I saw that you guys were partnering up, and I watched your first video, and I was like, oh, Debra, oh my gosh. So seriously, if you guys get a chance on LinkedIn, I think it's called Get Paid, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you look up Debra Schwartzfarb, excuse me, I just got all blah, 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 and Kimberly Miner.
It's my name.
I'm terrible. And look up there, go through and see if you can find those. Is there any other way for people to find those videos, or?
That's probably the best way, just to look us up on LinkedIn. We have all of them posted on LinkedIn under posts. And we do them every Thursday live at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we sort of go back and forth, but we're also thinking now we're going to bring on some guests who have, have their own experiences within the space. So we're trying to sort of expand our reach, but I appreciate you listening, and I'm glad you're liking it.
I do. I always get something out of it. I particularly liked your two-parter on ageism, because that's the zone I'm in. But I feel like you guys really have some good, cogent thoughts and advice around the topics that you cover. So besides ageism, what are some of the other topics that you guys have talked about so far?
So one of the things we talked about was how to recruit diverse candidates into companies, particularly if there's not very many people of color or diverse people within the company yet, and they're trying to recruit people in. And how do you do that? And what are the kinds of things? So that was one. Then we did one last week around culture checking. How do you check out a culture before you make a decision to join a company? So what are some ways for anybody to kind of do their research, get some sort of references on the side, and really what to look for during the interview process in its entirety to see how a company is? Because people, it's, how they say, like, you can tell how a person's character is by the things they do when nobody's looking. Well, companies are the same way. If you have a terrible experience just getting interviews set up and are not treated well by even, the people who are doing the scheduling, that should be a signal that maybe things aren't great. It's not always true, but it's one of the things you have to keep looking for, like patterns, and make those decisions around what's important to you. Because, company cultures are they just exist, and you have to decide whether the things that are important to that company match with the things that are important to you. So we're doing a second part on culture this week, and that one is about what happens when current events come into the workplace and how that can impact the culture as well. I mean, now's the time to talk about that. It's not all about politics, but, in the climate that we're in right now, it can get very heated. And if you are somebody who maybe has a different perspective than other people in your company, and how does that play out, and how do leaders respond to times like that?
Man, and right now, I mean, never more important to talk about something like this, because it seems like every time we turn around, there is something new and epic in proportion, epic, the scale of what is happening this year and how polarizing it seems to be for everybody is just really something. So that's a tricky thing to navigate at work.
It is. And I think for me, coming out of a big company and, having so much experience in a big company, it's not something you ever do, right? You're never supposed to talk about politics. I mean, people do, but especially in HR, you don't. But then when you go to a small company, as I said, the rules are different, and, companies have their own cultures in that way, and what they think is okay. And especially when there are diverse people, whatever that diversity might be, whether it be color or LGBTQ or even age or whatever it is, you have to be mindful of what's going on. Just because you have an opinion, or you think that everybody has the same opinion about something, it's very hard in the workplace to bring those current events in and not create some issues. So, and it takes a strong leader too, to be able to manage all of the differences that are in their group to begin with. But when the outside starts coming in, what do you do? So it's hard right now. Is really hard. And we don't have all the answers. That's the thing. We never think we have all the answers. We just try to give our best thoughts based on our experience. And,
I love that you say you don't have all the answers. I think so often we all tend to feel like we should have all the answers, and or pretend that we have all the answers. And I think that it's refreshing to hear that. And I think it's so much more important for us all to be asking the right questions, or asking as many questions as possible, and staying open to the idea that maybe we don't have the answers.
And also, I think with people sometimes ask questions, but they come to the questions with already have a point of view. Like if you're really going
Mm-hmm.
to ask questions, it's really important, I think, to really ask and be open to the answers that you might not be expecting. Because sometimes we all do this. We go in and we'll ask, but we really think we know. And when you hear something that you didn't expect, it's like, wait a minute, I didn't expect that. So I think asking with a truly open mind is probably the best way to go. But, sometimes that just, all of us, or including myself, it just
Of
doesn't
course.
happen.
Yeah, we all have that little hidden agenda that, oh, I forget what that's called when you there's a great term for it when you're already looking for something, right? So it
So
affects the outcome of the question asked. You've already kind of got a supposition that's hidden in the background back there,
yes,
right?
yes,
Knows what
I
you're
don't
doing.
know the term. I know what you mean though. And yes, that's what I'm talking about. It's just really being like open to whatever comes from the question, whatever answer comes your way, just be open to it.
Yeah.
So we try.
I am just so I look at what you're doing and it's just seems to me the model of what somebody should do if you're going to use a should um during a job search. You are staying active and you've got a schedule and what have you learned about yourself this year? I mean, that's a big question, but have do you feel like you've had any aha moments about Deb this year?
A couple, I don't know. Yeah. So one of the things, which is not a huge aha, was that I was somebody who, always believed I had to work in an office to be productive and to get things done. And I don't believe that anymore. I think that, right now I'm still sort of working off of my counter and my dining room table back and forth. But if I were to get a job that could be at least partially remote, I do have a small office here and I would absolutely redo it and make a real office out of it. And I think I could be really productive as, hoping that COVID will, die down at some point so that you could go back outside freely. But
Mhm.
that's one thing I've learned. And the other thing is that, I see myself working in a, whatever, a corporate or a company probably for another 10 years. And in my mind, I went into the search initially thinking it was going to be one more thing for 10 years. And now I realize that may not be what happens. It might be one thing for 3 years and then something else. And I'm not going to think in such, to your point earlier, a linear fashion about what has to be next. I do know that I want to work within a company again. I don't want to consult full time, at least not right now, maybe further down the road. But I understand that it could be a shorter stint or two shorter stints rather than just one long one. And I'm open to that. And I'm, trying to be as open as I can to whatever opportunities come my way. Because that's the other thing, people get very shut down around somebody talks to them about something and they're already saying no before they even had a conversation about it. And I always tell people, until you have a job offer in front of you, keep exploring. And then once you have an offer, if you don't want to take the job or you realize along the way that it's just not right, then you can back out. But don't back out before you ever put a foot in, And
Yeah.
people do that. They get their mind goes all the way till the end. They're like, I don't think I want to work here. I'm like, you haven't even met anyone. So, keep your mind open and just, until you have something in front of you to say no to, don't say no.
That's such an interesting take on it. I really that's really cool. Yeah, just keep exploring it, right? And
Yeah,
that
I mean,
keeps there's something I would imagine that could do also for your mindset as other opportunities come in your way because as they say it's always easier to get a job when you have a job and I would imagine that would translate into so if you think you might have a job offer you kind of get that same energy that you do like thinking okay there's possibility here. It's like having that sense of possibility and that might open the door to another possibility somewhere else too, just based on the type of energy that you are bringing to the table.
yes, I think that's true. And I think, for me, the other thing I've thought about a lot is how I do show up. and making sure that even though it's been a weird time and it's been a weird time for everyone, that I'm not coming to these networking meetings in a way that feels like not I'm not invested and I'm not engaged, because it does make a difference how you show up. And people, make judgments about that. So I am very conscious and careful. And even though it's been a difficult time, I feel very supported. I have a lot of support. I have friends and family, and I see enough people, even in COVID, from far away, that I don't feel isolated in the search. And it has been challenging, but I also feel like it is positive, and there will be a positive result, even if it takes longer. But to your point, when you do have things going on, it does build on itself. Like, it does make you feel like, okay, and that does come through. And when I talk about, not saying no to you'll have an offer, listen, there's going to be times where you get into a situation and you're interviewing and you realize, this is definitely not right for me. And at that point, you should back out.
Yeah.
But if you're not sure, you should explore as long as you possibly can, and don't just dismiss something out of hand. Like, I know people who won't take an interview at all. And it's like, take the interview. At the very least, you'll get the practice interviewing, even if you ultimately, decide to back away. So I just encourage people to explore as much as they feel comfortable exploring.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, just again, kind of going back to everything you've been doing, and you said you're not feeling isolated. I think that is purely because you've been consistently putting it out there. You have created a sort of system, or a little ecosystem for yourself, where you have structure, you have connections on a regular basis, you have something to do every day, and that is going to translate into keeping your energy up and allowing you to show up with that brighter energy for everything that you do. Because
Yeah.
right?
I appreciate you saying that. Yes, that's what I've tried to do, because I know enough about myself to know that I do like things that are pretty routine. I mean, they don't have to be perfect, but I like to know sort of what I'm doing for the day. And by keeping that up, it's been very, like, treating the week almost like a work week, with a little bit of give at the end of the day, because there's only so much time you can spend with your head in a computer trying to find a job,
Right.
or even networking. But pretty much treating it like a work day, and then treating the weekends like a weekend, has really, yes, it's kept me in a good place, for
Yeah, and
sure.
it sounds like you're also doing self-care, the exercise, and you take walks on a regular basis, right? And
I do.
yeah.
Yes, and I just bought a Peloton bike.
Woo-hoo.
So that's coming next month, because I realized that I walk 5 miles in the morning. Every morning I got out around
5
6:15.
miles.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's
I know.
fantastic.
But that's when I listen to my podcasts. So I, listen
Yeah.
to you and listen to the Daily, and sometimes to Bravo, depends on my mood.
Uh-huh.
But as I realized that I started doing it at the end of March, when COVID happened and the gym closed, and realizing that I had not done it in the winter yet. And I thought, you know what, I do have my limits as to how cold I can be out there, like how cold it is. Because once you bundle up too much, it's hard to walk. So
Right.
that's why I decided I bit the bullet and got the bike. So I'll have
I'm
something to do.
picturing, do you ever see, what was it, Christmas Story, and she bundles up the kid and he like
Pretty much.
he's like a little starfish? I just had an
Yeah.
image of that.
I'm somebody who's like hats, scarves, gloves. I'm like always ready for winter, but it's not that easy to walk, and it is a long walk. So I'll have the bike in the winter, and hopefully, if we get lucky, and I mean, this year's been nothing but unlucky, but if we have a mild winter again, then I'll still be able to get out there, I think, for a good part of the time. But yeah, I love to exercise, and I encourage that too, because I've always been somebody who's exercised since I was probably 25. I never played sports. I'm not really that coordinated, but I've always exercised, probably, yeah, since I was about 25. So a long time. And it has, in a lot of ways, like, saved me. That walk every day sort of really, and moving my body and being outside and coming back and then being able to focus has made a huge difference. And then the yoga that I do with Jade, and I do another yoga with my best friend has a yoga studio. She lives in South Carolina, so we'll do yoga sometimes together on Zoom through her studio.
Cool.
So yeah, so I've been trying to keep that up. But I agree with you. I think you have to take care of the whole the whole person. Otherwise, it can wear on you, especially during this time. When you're still sort of in lockdown.
Yeah, I've been looking back on. I finally have gotten to the point where, I mean, probably this morning excepted, I did not exercise this morning. And remember when we got on, I told you I was feeling tired. I'm now thinking to myself, oh, well, you didn't get up and do your usual. I started a morning routine probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, where I would get up before the kids and meditate and exercise, either a nice long walk like you're talking about, or yoga, which has completely saved me during this whole time. And there is something about, like, in my 40s, well, my kids were younger, first of all, and it was just like a constant struggle to keep balance. There was a lot, it seemed like there was a lot more unexpected interruptions in my day with younger kids. And now as they've gotten older, it's easier to kind of settle into a routine. But in my 40s, I was very sporadic with exercise. I'd be like maybe 3 days a week, maybe, and man, doing it every day is a total game changer. I feel better now than I've felt in 10 years, at least.
Wow. I know. It's great. It's like, even though on the days like I wake up, a few weeks ago, it rained like 4 days in a row,
Right.
4 mornings. When it rains, I don't go. I mean, I know people that still do, but that's sort of like, if it's really raining out, I don't go. And by the third day, I'm like, oh my gosh, like yoga's fine, but it doesn't give me that same sort of, the walking or any sort of, like, I speed walk. So I try to walk as fast as I can. Something about being outside and that adrenaline and that it just clears your head.
Yes. Yeah. A good brisk walk there for me. Like, I'm not a runner.
No.
I generally don't like to sweat.
Oh, that's funny.
But I love walking, and there is something about being able to get out in that fresh air, and just my mind is able to kind of let go of the things that are, niggling, or I'm able to come up with ideas. It's just really a great tie-in to me for thinking and
Yes.
yeah.
I think I agree. Exercise is very, very important.
What do you think you bring to the game now that you didn't when you were younger? You mean in middle age? Like, if you had come across this situation 15 years ago, how do you think you might have handled it differently?
Well, I think one of the lessons I learned when I left Toys R Us after 20 years, I had asked to leave. The company had gone private. I was there almost 20 years and I needed to make a change. But, so I asked to leave because they were doing the reorganizations and I would have ended up probably staying, but I knew it was time, but I wanted to leave with a package, So I ended up leaving, and it was more, I would say, what I realized was that I had not been networking at all, because I'd been at the same company for 20 years. I didn't have any external contacts, not even recruiters. I didn't even know the benefit of it. And I swore to myself at the time, because I was conscious enough to realize, like, oh my gosh, I don't know anyone, to realize that your network and keeping in touch with people is so important. And it's a long game, and it's not just in the need. And so I think what I know now is I've done that. And especially in my last role, where you were talking to people all day long as a recruiter, you were networking as part of your job. But a lot of those relationships, like Kimberly's a good example. I have other people that I placed that I'm still in touch with, who have been helping me out, make connections for my own job search. So I think what I've learned is the value of being open to new connections, because sometimes you don't realize where the help's going to come from. And when you're in a job search, one of the lessons that I've kind of learned is that sometimes the people you expect are either going to be wanting to or able to help you. You're like, oh, that person will be able to really help me. And they turns out that they either can't, or they have other things going on, or just they can't, and you thought they could. And people who you least expect to be able to be of any help turn out to be an amazing help. And a good example is somebody introduced me to somebody so that I could help her with something in her job. She, though, decided she was leaving that role. And so on a whim, when she emailed me back and said, hey, I'm not going to be here, I'm leaving. And I said, hey, would you mind just connecting with me once you leave? And so we connected last week. She's introduced me to 4 people.
Wow.
And I already have 2 of those contacts on my calendar for next week. So she's somebody who doesn't even know me. It was just one of those weird random things. And I happened to say, can we just network? And she was so lovely. So I've learned that don't assume that your contacts can help you, that the close ones that you know, that you assume are going to be able to be like slam dunk, and don't discount any opportunity to talk to somebody because you just don't know.
Right. And good on you for asking to get that conversation. Like, that is amazing. Because I think sometimes people are afraid to ask for that conversation.
Or yes. And my younger self probably wouldn't have asked. I probably would have thought I was bothering her, but I did it in a way that said, hey, would you be willing? And another thing is, there's a woman on Remote Daily, you probably noticed, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
She comes on and listens. So she's a contact of mine too, that I had made. She does search work as well. And we've stayed connected, and I had referred her to Remote Daily, and she ended up being a daily listener. And I was just talking to her this morning, and we were catching up, and she mentioned by chance somebody that she knows who works in a company that I want to work, I want to try to target. So she is, so you just never know where the conversations go. And so my younger self would probably have been a lot more reticent to really branch out and ask. And my current self is probably just more confident and more self-assured because I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize, like, there's ways to ask, and you can also give back. I try to give back or give first. I always try to pay it forward anyway, and hope that it will come back.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow. Mic drop. I don't know if I have anything else.
Oh my gosh.
That really is it, right? It's like giving first is such a huge, powerful thing. If we forget our power, I think, the power in giving and what that allows for, and it to ask. I mean, it's like, it's this exchange, right, of giving and taking, and not feeling like you need to always be receiving.
Yes.
And using, and I love that you said that, that the networking is a long game. It so is. Because that takes the pressure off of your relationship with that person, because that's what's really important, is having that relationship. And if you're suddenly in a place of need and want, and you're looking to everything for what can this do for me, that people feel that.
Yes. I believe that. And I think that there's ways, you can introduce yourself to new people and still ask for what you need, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't put that person on the spot. You have to really say, listen, I'm exploring, would you be willing to network with me? And that should be what it's for, and let it sort of go from there. And then in other cases, you give just to give. And, Remote Daily is a place where I just really fell in love with it and the format. Mm-hmm. And just
me too
decided, what, if I have something to give that will make this better, then I'm just going to give it, and hope that, the universe will
right
will eventually pay back in some way.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I every time I I go to Remote Daily because of everything that I get from it. As you said, like you're going there not only for the networking, but as part of your ongoing education. Like every time I go in and there's some topic that I never expected to be covered in Remote Daily, and just fascinating things like having Michelle Thaller on, and from she's an astrophysicist from NASA.
Yeah.
2 times with her, both just mind blowing, and never knowing, like, having Kosha Dills on last week, having a rapper on, and just it's such a unique experience, and
And
yeah,
I think watching Felix, I mean, he's so good at
yeah.
interviewing people and the way he handles the whole show.
Mhm.
Again, I have a hard time. I don't know what I call it, but his way of handling it is so great. I learned stuff from just watching him
Mhm.
interview and kind of manage the time. And, he manages interesting, tough situations sometimes, and he kind of is so elegant in his handling of it. So just that part is fascinating to me to watch it evolve
Mhm.
into what it's become. And I don't know what it is. Like today, I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have it today. Like I was
I
missing it,
know. Me too. Me too. Oh my goodness. Well, we have talked a lot about Remote Daily. I will definitely put something in the show notes for anybody who is interested. And
Yep.
so, just a couple of quick little fun questions before
Sure.
we go. What is there a book or a movie or anything that has been formative for you, that when you read it or you saw it, that was something that like set you down a path or a road?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to be honest, my reading is pretty mystery based. I read primarily as an escape.
Uh-huh.
So I can't, it's hard for me to say. I mean, I did listen to the Michelle Obama book on
Uh-huh.
audio.
Yes.
And, I mean, she's like a hero to me. I love her. But, that was probably as off the mystery track as I've gotten.
Really? So
Um,
so that's fun actually. So who are some of your favorite authors or series that you follow?
I like Lee Child. He writes a series of books that are
Yeah,
they
I'm
have
trying
one
to think of
character in them.
yeah, I've heard of Lee Child before, and I'm trying to remember if I've read any. Can you come up with a title, or we'll look it up after and I'll throw
I don't know.
something up?
Yeah, I have to look it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Because unfortunately, I will say this. This is what I'm going to try to wean myself off of. I have spent the last 4 years watching a lot of cable news, and prior to 2016, I never watched cable news. I didn't know the difference between CNN, MSNBC. I never watched them. And then unfortunately have become addicted. And I was hoping now that the election's over, I can like wean back off and onto things that
Mhm.
are better for my brain.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm trying to think from TV or movies. I saw last year, I think it was the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie that
Oh,
was in
which I
the
didn't
theaters.
see. Uh-huh.
That was
Yeah.
great. I mean, I guess it's like I knew about her, but I didn't really know her whole story. And just watching the movie, it was really awesome to see what she did for women.
Yeah.
It was so moving. And then, unfortunately to lose her this year, especially when we lost her, was just really sad. So that
Mm.
that movie definitely impacted me. But other than that, I've been into escapism. Unfortunately, I'm a big
Nothing
Bravo
wrong with that, man.
watcher.
I read for all kinds of reasons, and escapism is certainly way up there. So
Yes,
I don't think you should discount that so much.
yes, yes. But I don't have it. It didn't have like some like big, answer for you. It's just
That's all good. That's all good. Is there anything on your nightstand right now that you're reading?
actually I just read I couldn't see this is here's my Kindle. It's right here. I just read a book that was like one of those things where it's like here's recommended for you. And it's sort of one of those mysteries. It was called The Best of Friends. It's not a mystery so much as more of a kind of a thriller about a group of women and their sons are all best friends. And then there's a terrible accident and what happens to the relationship. So that was those kinds of like, what's the one that everyone, Gone Girl, those types of, I like those reads. So this one was sort of that way. And it was good. And it was hard for me to put down. So I was able to turn off some of the TV to read it. But my father reads, he reads like 4 or 5 books a week. And
wow.
And he loves Bachman. Have you read any, like A Man Called Ove?
I was just thinking of Bachman because I'm trying to remember the name of A Man Called Ove is one of my favorite books. And I've read quite a few of his books since, and I'm trying to think of
Anxious People. Is that the new one?
Oh, maybe. It's not the one I was trying to think of, though. The one I was trying to think of is this one that's Beartown.
Beartown.
Something weird. Beartown. Oh my goodness, you might like that one because there is a little bit of mystery involved. I mean, the structure of the book is really cool. So yeah, check that one.
Yeah, so he raves about the author, and he's given me A Man Called Ove, but I just haven't read it yet. But so I'm thinking I should probably veer off the thriller stuff or try something else.
Ova is definitely going to take you off that course. And I would say stick through it. Like, he's a character that you might not think you're going to like in the beginning, but he's going to win you over.
Okay.
I'll just say
good
that.
to know.
I don't want any spoilers, but
okay.
So, oh my goodness, very cool. Is there anything you're excited about just coming up?
Well, we're trying to figure out the holidays. So that's one thing. I think it's just going to be myself and my parents for Thanksgiving. My sister, I think, is going with her family to North Carolina to visit my brother-in-law's family. And then my brother lives in California. So unfortunately, we usually do see them for Thanksgiving, but that's not going to happen this year. So it's going to be small. So we may go rogue and not have a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. We may do something else. So that's exciting. And other than that, I just want to get 2020 behind us.
Yes.
and look forward to hopefully some, good news on COVID and on the job front and all of that in 2021.
Good luck. I'm wishing you all kinds of good luck. And I know you're on your way there anyway, because you're doing all the good things to make that happen. It's gonna roll together for you for sure.
Yeah.
I feel
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to talk about it, especially since you're in the midst of this process. And I feel like that takes a whole other level of bravery to come on and talk about something when you're in the middle of a process like this. So I really appreciate it. Well, there you have it. If you want to know more about Debra, I'll have that information for you in the show notes. And you can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and click on the show notes for episode 26. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And hey, I don't know if you guys are signed up for my email or if you even knew that was a thing, but it is. You can sign up for email and you can get weekly emails from me letting you know when the new episode's out and any other little goodies that I decide to drop off. And speaking of goodies, I do have a new one. Whether you're new to the email list or not, you can get a hold of this. It's called 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. And I will have more information about that in the show notes for this show. So you just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and then look for episode 26 and you can sign up there to get that. Okay. Thank you again for listening, being with me on this journey. I love it. I love you guys. And stay safe and and talk soon.